Welcome back to the deep dive. It is so good to have you with us today. We're tackling something massive. And when I say massive, I don't just mean big history. I mean, we are looking at the tectonic plates of civilization literally moving under our feet.
That is a very vivid way to put it. And I think tectonic is exactly the right word. It's slow, it's immensely powerful. And when it shifts, the entire landscape changes.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a stack of sources here, as always, but our centerpiece today is this fascinating, almost poetic historical summary. It's called Texto Colado.
Right.
And honestly, reading it felt a bit like reading the autopsy report of an entire world order. But at the same time, it also felt like the birth certificate of the one we live in now.
It's both, isn't it? It's a story of metamorphosis.
Yeah.
I mean, we're looking at how this massive monolithic structure Christianity faced, the kind of existential threat that usually just wipes institutions off the map entirely. And instead of dying, it changed its shape. It turned into something almost unrecognizable from what it was before.
It's the ultimate survival story. The source material sets up this incredibly dramatic premise. A world where empires are fading away, science is just exploding onto the scene, and this ancient faith is left standing there, suddenly, stripped of all the armor it used to wear.
All of its institutional power, yeah.
Exactly. We're talking about the shift from shaping crowns to shaping consciences.
And that distinction, crown versus conscience, that's got to be the North Star for our entire deep dives today, don't you think?
I think so.
How do you go from being the institution that literally decides who the king is to being the quiet voice inside someone's head, just asking them to be kind to their neighbor?
It's a huge shift.
It's a massive demotion, I mean, in terms of raw political power. But maybe, and I think this is what the text suggests, maybe it was an upgrade in terms of moral durability.
Oh, that's interesting. So our mission today is to decode that transition. We want to understand how belief survived when it lost the structural power that had propped it up for, 1,000 years?
Absolutely.
So we're going to look at the before picture, the catalysts for the crash, the crisis itself, and then finally this reinvention.
And for you listening, this matters because we're all still living in the ripples of this huge splash. The way we think about religion, politics, our own private values today, it was all forged in this fire we're about to discuss.
Absolutely. So let's rewind the clock. The source text gives us a starting point. It describes the old world, and it paints a picture that is, it's almost hard for us to imagine today. It says, faith shaped every law, every crown, every border.
Every law, every crown, every border. It's so important that we don't just gloss over that. We need to unpack that phrase because it sounds so absolute.
It does.
In the modern West, we're just so used to the idea of separation of church and state. It's a given. It's in the water supply for us.
Right. We take it for granted.
Completely. But the source is describing a world where that separation didn't exist. It couldn't exist. It wasn't just that the church was powerful. It was the operating system of reality.
The OS. I like that. So if faith shapes every crown, we're talking about the divine right of kings, aren't we?
That's the one.
Yeah.
Exactly. This is the political theory that justified power for centuries. Why is the king the king? Not because he won an election, not because he polls well in the swing states. He is king because God ordained it and the church confirmed it. Legitimacy flowed from the top down, from God through the church to the monarch.
So if you removed the faith component, the whole political structure would
It would literally collapse. It was the glue holding the entire social hierarchy together. There was no other justification for it.
I see.
The king answers to God and the people answer to the king. The church is the crucial intermediary in that chain of command. So to challenge the church wasn't just heresy.
It was treason.
It was treason. It was a direct challenge to the political stability of the entire realm.
And the text mentions borders, too. That implies that geography itself, the very lines on the map, were religious.
Oh, they were. Completely. We didn't have nation states in the way we think of them now, with, shared language and culture as the primary unifier.
So what did we have?
We had Christendom. We had the Islamic world. Your passport, if you had one, wasn't really about your language or your ethnicity. It was about your confession. Your religious identity was your political identity.
So to be a citizen was to be a believer.
Yes. And if you were a heretic, you weren't just wrong in a theological sense. You were a political traitor. You were a foreign agent, in a way.
That's a crucial distinction. It means there was no outside. You couldn't just opt out of the system.
No, there was no neutral ground. It was total Faith was the atmosphere you breathed. It defined the calendar, the holidays, the food you ate, the laws you obeyed, the social hierarchy. It was a complete before picture, a total integration of the spiritual and the temporal.
It sounds stifling to a modern ear, doesn't it? But at the same time, also incredibly orderly. Everything had its place.
It provided a tremendous sense of security and continuity. You knew who you were, you knew what your job was, and you knew where you fit in the great cosmic scheme of things. There was a certainty there that we've completely lost.
But then the text drops the hammer, the inciting incident. It gives us 3 massive catalysts that just shatter this world. It says, empires faded, science advanced, nations rose.
And those 3 things, empires, science, nations, they're basically the 3 horsemen of the apocalypse for that old world order.
So let's break them down one by one. Let's start with empires faded. Why does the source lead with that one?
I think because the empire was the political vessel for that religious unity.
Yeah.
Think of something like the Holy Roman Empire. It was this massive, sprawling, multi-ethnic thing.
Right. Not very holy, not very Roman, not really an empire.
Hey, exactly. But what held it together, at least in theory, it wasn't a shared language. They spoke dozens of languages. It wasn't a shared culture. It was held together by one idea, the cross.
It was a religious project.
It was a religious project. So when the source says these empires faded, it's talking about the breakdown of that universal ambition. The glue that held all these disparate peoples together, it stopped holding.
And right on the heels of that, the source says, nations rose.
This seems like the natural replacement then.
It is, but it's a hostile takeover. It's not a friendly handoff. When nations rise, we see the birth of the modern nation state. And suddenly, being French or German or English starts to matter more than being a generic Christian.
It's a new identity.
A new and much more localized identity. The state starts demanding the loyalty that the church used to own exclusively. Your primary allegiance shifts.
It's a competition for allegiance then.
Precisely.
Yeah.
If the king is now ruling because of national interest, because France needs to be strong to compete with England, rather than just divine fiat, the church is suddenly moved a little bit away from the center of power. The king doesn't need the bishop's blessing as much as he used to. He needs the general to win wars and the tax collector to fund them. The logic of power changes. So the political foundation starts to crack. But the real disruptor, the one that changes the internal landscape, the whole operating system, is the third one. Science advanced.
The ultimate disruptor.
The text calls this out specifically. Science advanced. Now, we're not just talking about, better plows or faster ships.
No, not at all. We are talking about a completely new way of finding truth. This is what philosophers call the epistemic shift.
Okay, explain that for us. Epistemic shift.
Well, epistemology is the study of how we know what we know. It's about knowledge itself.
Right.
In the old world, how did we know the age of the earth? We asked the church. We looked in the Bible.
Right.
How did we know why people got sick? We looked at theology. Maybe it was a punishment for sin. Maybe it was a test from God. Authority came from revelation, from the sacred book, from the tradition of the elders.
Right. The answer was always because God said so, or because the ancient scholar that the church approves of said so.
Exactly. But when science advances, it introduces a new, and I would say rival, authority, observation, reason, evidence.
Yeah.
If the telescope says the earth goes around the sun, but the tradition says the sun goes around the earth, you have a direct conflict of authorities. And for the first time in history, truth wasn't owned solely by the priests anymore.
That breaks the monopoly on truth itself.
It shatters it. It completely shatters it. And the source sums this up with a devastatingly simple line. Faith no longer shaped every law.
That's the funeral knell for the old OS, isn't it? The monopoly is gone. You now have the scientist explaining the weather, the politician defining the borders, and the church is, well, where is it? What's its role now?
And that's the panic. The vacuum opens up. And this leads us directly into the conflict, the second segment. Because institutions, especially ones that have been in charge for a millennium, they don't just give up power politely.
No, they fight back.
They fight back. And the source material calls this the new challenge.
Okay, let's move into that. Segment 2. The text gets very, very specific about the nature of this fight. It says, the church faced a new challenge. Reason questioned revelation.
Reason questioned revelation. This is the intellectual heart of the entire deep dive. This is the core conflict.
We touched on this with science, but let's go deeper here. Revelation is the top-down truth. Reason is the bottom-up truth.
That's a perfect way to put it. Revelation says, this is true. Because the divine source, God, revealed it. It requires submission. It requires faith. You accept it. It is a gift to be received, not a puzzle to be solved.
Okay, that makes sense.
But reason says, I will only accept this as true if it makes sense logically and if I can verify it empirically. It requires verification. It says, show me the proof. Let me test it for myself.
So it's the difference between trust me and show me.
Exactly. And you have to imagine the psychological shift for an entire society. For 1,000 years, the answer to the deepest questions of why was mystery, or because it is written. Suddenly the answer to why is, let's figure it out. Let's dissect it. Let's run an experiment. It's like a teenager suddenly realizing their parents aren't omniscient. It changes the power dynamic in the house forever.
That is such a good analogy. When you're 5, Dad is Superman. When you're 15, Dad is just a guy who doesn't understand TikTok and probably gets some things wrong.
Yes. And society was turning 15. It was becoming rebellious. It was starting to think for itself. And that is incredibly dangerous for an institution that relies on obedience and tradition.
And the text adds another layer to this clash. It says, progress challenged tradition.
This is the temporal battle, the battle over time itself. Tradition, by its nature, looks backward. It assumes that the wisdom of the ancestors is the peak of knowledge. The golden age is behind us.
Right.
So the goal of a traditional society is to preserve what was given, to not mess it up.
The old ways are the best ways.
Right. But progress, which is a very, very modern idea, by the way, looks forward. It assumes the future can and should be better than the past. It assumes that new is better. It assumes that we can solve problems that our ancestors couldn't.
So if you are an institution like the church, which is built entirely on the concept of an ancient, unchanging, revealed truth, progress is a fundamental threat. It implies that you are obsolete.
It frames you as the anchor dragging behind the ship of human advancement, slowing everyone down.
Wow.
Or at least that's how the proponents of reason started to paint it. They framed the church not as the foundation of society, but as the primary obstacle to its improvement. They said, look, science is giving us vaccines, steam engines, electricity. What is tradition giving us? Old rules and superstition.
It's a powerful narrative.
A very powerful narrative. And then we get the third, and perhaps the most potent, reshape. The text says, freedom reshaped belief.
Freedom. It's such a loaded word, isn't it?
It is.
We usually cheer for freedom. I mean, who doesn't want freedom? But here, the text frames it as a disruption.
It is a disruption because it introduces choice. In that old crown and border era we talked about, you didn't have the freedom to choose your religion. It was assigned to you at birth, like your eye color or your social class. Freedom reshaped belief means the marketplace of ideas suddenly opened up.
Meaning, I can choose to buy what you're selling, or I can go to the shop next door.
Or, and this is the crucial part, you can choose to buy nothing at all. And that is the terrifying part for the institution that used to own the only shop in town.
And the source gives us the outcome of this. It says, some abandoned faith. Others redefined it.
That's the binary. Once the coercion is gone, once the legal and social requirement to believe is lifted, you see an exodus. Some abandon faith. This is the rise of modern secularism.
Atheism, agnosticism.
Or just plain indifference, which is probably the biggest category. Before this shift, abandoning faith was a social death sentence, sometimes a literal one. Now it's just a lifestyle choice.
But the second group is fascinating to me. Others redefined it.
This is the adaptation. This is the great project of theological liberalism, really. Yeah. These are the people who said, okay, I accept science. I like progress. I value freedom. But I still feel this spiritual pull. There's something here I don't want to lose. So how do I make these things fit together?
They had to patch the software.
They had to. They had to update the doctrine to make it compatible with the new hardware of the modern world. They started to reinterpret things, re-examine texts.
So we've got this intellectual battlefield, reason, progress, freedom. It's a war of ideas. But the source material is really clever here. It doesn't just stay in the abstract world of philosophy. It grounds this massive shift in physical reality.
Yes, it does.
It tells us that Christianity, this old faith, it had to move into new territories. It moved into cities, factories, and classrooms.
I love this list because it gives us the scenery of the modern era. These are the places where the battle for the soul was actually fought. It wasn't just fought in books and pamphlets. It was fought in the noisy, crowded, dirty streets of the 19th and 20th centuries.
Let's walk through them. First, cities. What's the significance of the city?
It's the move from the rural village to the urban metropolis. This is urbanization, the great migration of the modern era. And think about the difference. In a village, everyone knows you. Everyone is watching you. The social pressure to conform to the tradition is immense.
The church is probably the biggest building in town.
It's the physical center of the town square. You can't miss it. The priest knows your name. Your neighbors know if you skipped mass.
But in a city,
you are anonymous. You are one of a million souls. You can walk past 20 churches and nobody notices if you don't go in. More importantly, you encounter diversity. You meet people with different religions, different ideas, different lifestyles.
right?
And that diversity weakens what sociologists call the plausibility structure of your old faith.
Okay, plausibility structure. What is that?
Peter Berger uses that term. It basically means the social web of people and institutions that makes a belief feel true and obvious. If everyone around you believes in ghosts, it's very plausible to you that ghosts exist. But if you move to a city where nobody believes in ghosts, and in fact they laugh at the idea, suddenly your own belief feels shaky. It seems less plausible. The city destroyed the old plausibility structure of the monolithic faith by exposing people to countless alternatives.
So the source mentions cities to show that faith had to learn to survive in this dense, chaotic, pluralistic environment where it was just one voice among many, many others.
Exactly. It had to learn to compete. It had to make its case in the marketplace, not just issue decrees from the palace.
Okay, then we have the factories. This brings up the Industrial Revolution. This is a very different kind of challenge.
A very different and in many ways a colder, harder challenge. Factories. It represents the mechanization of the world and by extension, the mechanization of human life.
So how does faith even fit into a factory setting?
That's the problem. The logic of the factory treats humans as hands, as labor units. It's a world of efficiency, production quotas, and the tyranny of the clock. It's strictly material. It is loud, dirty, dangerous, and repetitive.
It's dehumanizing.
It is profoundly dehumanizing. So the challenge for faith here was immense. Does it become a tool to keep the workers docile? You know, the old Marxist criticism, religion is the opium of the people.
Right.
Does the church just show up and say, your life is miserable now, but work hard, obey your boss, and you'll get pie in the sky when you die?
That would be the old world response, wouldn't it? Just maintain order, keep the hierarchy stable.
Absolutely. But the New World response, the one that allowed it to survive, had to be different. The church had to become a refuge, a place where the worker goes to remember, I am not a machine. I am not just unit number 734. I am a soul. I have an inherent worth that has nothing to do with how many widgets I produce today.
That's a powerful tension. The factory tries to turn you into a cog. The church has to remind you that you're a creation.
And later on, as we'll see in the source, that tension actually birthed a new kind of social advocacy. But initially, the factory was just this brutal alien environment that challenged the old agrarian rhythm of faith. God was in the cycles of the harvest. Where is God in the noise of the steam engine?
It's a tough question to answer, and that brings us to the third location, classrooms.
Which circles us right back to that first catalyst, science advanced. Historically, who ran the schools?
The church.
The church did. Education was for reading scripture, for training priests. The Bible was the primary textbook for history, for science, for everything.
But in this new world, the state runs the schools.
The state runs the schools, and the curriculum is secular. It's biology, it's geology, it's physics, it's history based on archaeological evidence, not sacred texts.
So the classroom becomes a contested space.
It's the primary battleground for the mind of the next generation. If the biology teacher says human beings evolved from other primates over millions of years, and on Sunday the pastor says human beings were made directly from dust on a Tuesday, the child is caught in the middle. They have to choose.
That is a massive conflict for a kid to navigate.
It is. The classroom is where reason questioned revelation on a daily institutional basis for millions of children. It's where the authority of the scripture was directly challenged by the authority of the scientific textbook.
So the entire environment has completely changed. We aren't in the cathedral anymore. We're in the smog of the city, the noise of the factory, the cold logic of the classroom. And the text says the institution reacted to this. New denominations emerged. Old churches adapted.
The market responds to demand. New denominations emerged, suggest fragmentation. People wanted different things. If the old state church is too rigid, too tied to tradition, well, you start a Methodist movement that focuses on personal experience and social work.
Or the Salvation Army.
Or the Salvation Army, which goes right into the slums of the cities. Or a Unitarian group that tries to reconcile faith with reason. You customize the faith to fit these new modern needs.
It's that concept of freedom working its way through the system again.
Yes. And old churches adapted. Even the big, slow, ancient ships had to start turning. It was slow, it was painful, but they had to.
They couldn't just sit there and pretend and nothing had changed.
No. They had to start their own social programs to compete. They had to send priests into the slums to work with the poor. They had to start universities that taught science and faith, trying to find a synthesis. Adaptation is the only alternative to extinction.
But even with that adaptation, it wasn't a smooth ride. Not at all. The text moves us into a segment that feels very heavy, very serious. It calls it the crisis of authority.
Yes. This is where the rubber really meets the road. We can talk about adaptation in these nice, clean terms, but the reality on the ground was a brutal stripping away of certainty. It was a crisis of faith for millions.
The text lists the casualties of this crisis. The Bible was debated, miracles were questioned, authority was resisted. Let's start with the first one. The Bible was debated.
This refers to the rise of what's called historical criticism, or higher criticism. For the first time, scholars in secular universities started looking at the Bible not just as a magic book that fell from the sky.
Right, as the inerrant word of God.
But as a historical text. A document written by human beings in specific historical contexts, edited by other human beings, translated, copied, and potentially containing errors, contradictions, and biases, just like any other ancient text.
That must have been utterly shocking for the average believer.
It was earth-shattering. Think about it. If the Bible can be debated, if parts of it can be shown to be factually wrong about history or geography, can it then be trusted about salvation? About God? It introduced doubt right into the very foundation. It turned the rock into sand for a lot of people.
And then it says, miracles were questioned.
This is the direct result of that scientific worldview we've been talking about. Science relies on natural law. Gravity always works the same way. Water always boils at 100 degrees Celsius at sea level. The universe is a predictable, closed system. So if you come along and claim a man walked on water, or a bush burned without being consumed, or a sea was parted, the scientific mind says that violates the known laws of physics. It's far more probable that it's a myth, a legend, or a metaphor.
So the supernatural elements of the faith, which are, they're pretty central to the whole story.
They are the whole story in many ways.
They start to look like embarrassments to the modern educated mind.
Right. And you get this movement of people trying to demythologize their religion, trying to strip out the magic but keep the morals. They wanted a faith that wouldn't get them laughed at in the university classroom.
A rational religion.
A rational religion. But the question is, what's left once you strip out all the mystery?
A good question. And that leads to the third point from the source. Authority was resisted.
This is the logical endpoint of the first two. If the book is debatable and the miracles are doubtful, then on what grounds does the priest or the pastor have any authority over you? You could look him in the eye and say, I disagree. Show me your evidence.
The fear is gone.
The fear is gone, and the automatic deference is gone. Authority was resisted is the birth of the modern critical individual who feels empowered to judge the institution rather than being judged by it.
Let's just pause here for a second. If I'm a listener hearing this list, empires are gone, science is the new king, the Bible is being debated and picked apart, miracles are being questioned as myths, and the church's authority is actively being resisted. It honestly sounds like the end of the story. It sounds like we are reading the obituary of Christianity.
If you were an alien observer watching this timeline from Mars, you would bet on extinction. 100%. You would say, this system is fundamentally incompatible with the new environment. It relies on ignorance, mystery, and submission. And this new world is all about knowledge, reason, and freedom. It'll die out in 2 generations, tops.
It looks like a dinosaur watching the meteor coming.
That's a perfect image for it. It seems doomed.
But
it didn't die. The text pivots here with a crucial, powerful 3-word sentence. Yet faith endured.
Yet faith endured. It didn't vanish. The factories didn't crush it. The science textbooks didn't disprove it into non-existence.
No. And so the real question becomes why? How did it possibly survive that onslaught? What new function did it find?
And the source gives us the answer. It says it found a new purpose. It basically stopped trying to be the king and started trying to be the servant.
The great shift from power to service.
Let's look at the specific lines here. It says, in times of war, the church comforted the broken.
And think about the historical context for that line. The 20th century. This is the era where all this progress and science and reason culminated. And what did it give us?
Unprecedented violence.
It gave us the machine gun. It gave us mustard gas. It gave us the atomic bomb. It gave us mechanized industrial scale slaughter in the trenches of World War I and across the globe in World War II.
The New World was incredibly efficient, but it was incredibly violent and brutal.
Precisely. Science could explain how the atomic bomb worked.
Yeah.
It could explain the physics of the explosion, but it had absolutely nothing to say to comfort the mother in Hiroshima who lost her child. It couldn't make sense of the suffering.
Science is cold.
Science is neutral. It's a tool. But human beings aren't tools. We are emotional, meaning-seeking beings. The modern world, for all its advances, created a deficit of comfort. It created brokenness on an industrial scale. And the church, having lost its political power, realized we might not be able to stop the war anymore because we don't control the crowns, but we can be there to heal the people who are crushed by it.
It found a niche that reason couldn't fill.
Reason is cold. Comfort is warm. Faith became the place for emotional survival in a harsh, mechanical, often meaningless feeling world. It became the Red Cross for the soul.
The source adds another role, which I find even more fascinating given the history we just discussed. In times of injustice, voices rose for dignity and human rights.
This is the massive pivot to advocacy.
But wait a minute, didn't the church cause a lot of injustice in the old world? Or at the very least, didn't it sanction it?
Oh, absolutely. And that's the great irony. When the church was the power, it often suppressed rights to maintain order. It burned heretics. It supported the divine right of monarchs. It blessed armies. But once it lost that worldly power, it was free to become the champion of the underdog.
So you're saying it's a trade-off. You lose the throne, but you gain the moral high ground.
Precisely. It is very, very hard to speak truth to power when you are the power.
Right.
If you are the king, you can't really critique the institution of the king.
Yeah.
But when you are on the margins, when you're no longer tied to the state, you can look at the factory owner exploiting his workers, or the dictator, or the segregationist state, and you can say from a place of moral clarity, this is wrong. These people have dignity.
And the text explicitly links this new role to human rights.
Which is itself a modern, secular-sounding concept, the idea that every human being has inherent worth and rights, regardless of their utility to the state or their social standing. The church, or at least parts of it, latched onto this idea. It reinvented itself as the conscience of the state rather than its ruler.
So if the state is the machine, the church became the ghost in the machine, the little voice shouting for humanity.
Exactly. I mean, think of the great moral voices of the 20th century. People like Martin Luther King Jr. or Dietrich Bonhoeffer in Nazi Germany or Archbishop Oscar Romero in El Salvador. These weren't rulers. They didn't have armies. They didn't shape crowns.
Yeah.
But they had immense influence. They used the language of faith to challenge the profound injustices of the modern world.
So in a strange way, losing all that political power actually freed them to do the real job of morality.
That is the argument the source is making, I think.
Yeah.
That being the crown had corrupted the faith.
Yeah.
And losing the crown purified it, in a sense, that forced the faith to go back to its origins of caring for the marginalized, because now the faith itself was marginalized.
Which brings us to the final transformation. The source summarizes this entire epic journey with a single powerful thesis statement. Christianity no longer ruled society, but it influenced conscience.
From rule to influence, that is the metamorphosis in a nutshell.
Let's really distinguish those two concepts for everyone listening. Rule versus influence.
Rule is external. It is the police officer, the tax collector, the border guard. It's fundamentally about coercion. It forces compliance through laws and punishments. You follow the rule because you fear the consequences if you don't.
You do it because you have to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But influence is internal. It's about your values, your ethics, your sense of hope or guilt or inspiration. You do something because you feel you should, because it aligns with who you want to be. It works from the inside out.
So the church moved from the courthouse to the human heart.
It moved from the public square to the private soul. And the text describes this new modern form of faith with three very specific words: personal, private, and revolutionary.
That's a really interesting trio of words. Let's take personal first.
Personal means your faith is yours. It's not your king's faith by default. It's not your nation's official religion. It is your individual relationship with the divine, whatever you perceive that to be. It allows for authenticity. It allows you to own it for yourself.
Okay.
Then private. This means it primarily happens behind closed doors. It's not necessarily a state spectacle anymore, with grand public processions that everyone has to attend. It's the prayer you say in your bedroom. It's the meditation you do on the bus. It can be hidden from the world.
But then comes the curveball, revolutionary. Usually we think if something is private and personal, it's quiet, it's passive, it's just about me and my feelings. If I keep my thoughts to myself, how on earth does that change the world?
And that's the brilliant paradox the text points out. It insists that this private faith is revolutionary. Why? Because conscience drives action.
Okay, connect that for me.
Well, if your private faith, your internal influence, tells you that a certain law is fundamentally unjust, or that a war is immoral, or that a factory is dehumanizing your neighbors, you will not be silent forever. Eventually, that private conviction will compel you to public action. You will resist, you will march, you will protest, you will boycott.
So the revolution doesn't start on the streets. It starts in the private conscience of one person.
Exactly. A person who follows their conscience is far harder for a state to control than a person who just follows orders. The state can force you to kneel, it can put you in prison, but it cannot force you to believe something. By retreating from the crown to the conscience, faith actually became untouchable by the state in its most essential form.
That's powerful. It gave up the sword, but it sharpened the spirit.
It did. It's the difference between a castle and a virus. You can blow up a castle, you could besiege it and knock down its walls. It's a visible target. It is much, much harder to kill a virus or an idea that lives inside millions of individual people. When faith became private, it became distributed, it became decentralized, it became harder to eradicate.
So the text wraps this whole story up with this beautiful summary. In a modern world shaped by change, belief did not disappear. It transformed.
Transformed. It's an evolutionary term, isn't it? It adapted to the new environment to survive.
It didn't die in the factory. It didn't vanish in the classroom. It just changed its shape to fit the new world.
And that is the core lesson of the source material. Resilience isn't about staying the same. Rigidity is fragility.
Yeah.
If the church had tried to stay exactly the same, if it had insisted on shaping every crown and every border in the 20th century, it would have shattered. It would have been broken by the modern world.
It would have become a museum piece, a relic.
Exactly. True resilience is about flexibility. It's about being willing to let go of the shell, the political power, the institutions, the borders, in order to preserve the kernel, the core message, the values, the connection to the transcendent.
It survived its own obsolescence by finding a new necessity.
A new necessity. I love that phrasing. It became the place where people go to find the things the modern world is very good at taking away. A sense of meaning, a sense of personal dignity, a sense of hope in the face of suffering. The factory gives us consumer goods, the classroom gives us scientific facts, but the faith in this new transformed state gives us a reason why any of it matters. It gives us purpose.
So we've tracked this incredible journey. From the map makers and kingmakers of the old world to the quiet voice in the back of the room standing up for human rights in the new world. It's quite an arc.
It is. In many ways, it's the story of how an institution learned to lose the world in order to save its soul.
That brings us to the end of the text, but, it doesn't feel like the end of the story. The source says, belief did not disappear, it transformed. But the world is still changing. We aren't done.
Not even close. The factory and the classroom were the great challenges of the 19th and 20th centuries. Those were the battlegrounds of the past.
So what are the challenges of the 21st? What are the new factories and classrooms?
Well, that's the question I think we have to leave the listener with, isn't it?
We have the internet. We have artificial intelligence. We have genetic engineering. We have a globalized digital world.
Exactly. So if the factory challenged the idea that human beings are souls and not just cogs, what does AI challenge? Does it challenge the idea that we are unique in our ability to think? Does it challenge the idea that we are the only conscious beings on the planet?
That's a big one. And if the nation state challenged our ultimate loyalty, does the global internet just dissolve loyalty altogether? In a world of disinformation, does it dissolve the very concept of truth, even more than the classroom ever did?
We are entering a new metamorphosis, a new crisis. And if history is any guide, faith won't disappear in this new world either. But it will almost certainly have to transform again.
It will have to find a new shape for the digital age, for the age of the algorithm.
Exactly. It will have to move from the conscience to where? We don't know yet.
Maybe connection or authenticity. In a world of deep fakes and virtual reality, maybe faith becomes the last anchor for what is truly real and human.
We'll have to watch and see. But the pattern of history suggests it will find a way. It will adapt.
And we will be here to deep dive into it when it happens. This has been a really fascinating look at the resilience of belief. Thanks for taking this journey with us.
My pleasure. It's a story that never really ends, does it?
Thanks for listening. We'll catch you in the next deep dive.